Week 6, we're talking about evaluating efficiency. Is something we touched on at the end of week 4 when you guys were back on live with me last, talking about the defensive possession type and how we can drive that transition to both, I guess, determine the speed of our attack was kind of the main point I was talking about there. And then I just touched on the idea of points per possession. So we're going to be talking about more in-depth math than is probably safe for you guys to evaluate while you're driving. But we're going to record it again, so you can watch back to this if you want to really dive into the nitty-gritty of it. But the simplest way I've come to explain this with players is just comparing it to field goal percentage. So most of you guys are familiar with that. We divide the number of shots we made divided by the shots attempted. We get a percentage, a ratio that we can say, good or bad based on that. The problem with that one is it doesn't allow us to compare things, right? It's kind of a big blanket. It's like all the shots we took divided by all the shots, or all the shots made divided by all the shots attempted. It doesn't tell us twos versus threes and layups versus three pointers. And like, it's kind of a too generic to give us much good information. And so my favorite upgrade on that is to use points per shot value, which is a very similar division problem. It's just the number of points you scored divided by the shots attempted. And so we'll get into some examples and actually have a good study I did, I guess coming up on 2 years ago now, of the 2023 and 24 Celtics, the championship team. Because of their scoring efficiency, they had just some great examples of why this works and the type of shots they were taking. And I guess for the players, what I try to get out of this whole framework is the math behind shot selection. Like, this is why mathematically we want to take more of this shot and less of that shot. And then as a coach, you can take that a step further and like, hey, based on your efficiency as a player, I'm starting you this week because in practice you've been getting 1 point per shot on average for us, right? And then even bigger picture we'll get at the end is like your whole team offense. Like when we run this out of bounds play, we score this much points per shot on average compared to anything else we do. And so like kind of helps us simplify we've been talking about, scratch things off the list and make your whole framework simpler is like this is the most efficient thing we do. And maybe it's this kid with that kid running a ball screen in some scenarios that gets us really efficient possessions, and we're going to do that more. Or we're going to talk about the defensive possession again, like the more rebounds we get into fast breaks and the more steals and deflections we get that turn into fast breaks, the better our points per shot value is on the other end of the floor. So gear yourself for some math here. We're going to try to make this simple for you, but there's two methods I like to use this, kind of two different ways you can approach it. So one is taking your total points and without including free throws in this case, because we're trying to get a field goal attempt equivalent, right? So points without including whatever free throw points we scored divided by total field goal attempts. That gives us our points per shot value. And there is a way to actually compare apples to apples what your free throw value is, which we'll get to in a little bit. But this is like top level what you want to do with this. So example is we scored 22 points and we took 20 field goal attempts. We got 1.1 points per shot, which is really good. Like most of you guys are working with 7th, 8th
Yeah,
graders and below, which means this would be like you were top of the NBA
amazing.
playoff championship level
Yeah.
scoring, right? And so we're much more likely to see something in the zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.6, so nearly down half of this. But this is my example I chose to make it, try to make the math clear there. So method two is more like a predictive ability of this. So knowing how this works, if we know on average for our team or on average for a certain player what the point value is for a certain shot, then if we multiply that by the percentage they make it, then we can get to what our points per shot would be, right? So like if we know on our 2 point field goal percentage, we have a 40% shooter most of the time between layups and mid-range and everything that's 2 points, then we can say, 2 times 40% scoring 2 points, we're making 40% of them, gives us 0.8 points per shot. And that's kind of the expectation we have for that particular shot, either for our team or on an individual basis. Another example would be a 3 point field goal percentage. Because we're scoring 3 points for each shot, if it's a 30% shooter or a 30% as a team is what we're averaging, We multiply 3 times the decimal version of the percentage is all we're doing here. Zero point 0.3 gives us 0.9, right? And then free throws, again, we can compare apples to apples by using this. What compares to the equivalent of a 2 point possession, right? And so two free throws, because we get two chances at 70%, it actually gives us a lot higher value. So two shots times 70% gives us 1.4 points per shot, which we'll talk about more, but this is like the math behind why everybody says free throws win games. It's because you get two chances to make up the same 2 point shot and nobody's guarding you. So like even if you're hitting 50%, you're going to average 1 point for that possession, the equivalent of what you would have had out of your 2 point shot. So like it's way better to be fouled and shoot 50% than just about any other offense you can run, which is why we're intuitively we want players to get better free throws, but we don't ever really do the mathematical evidence to like prove to players why this is important and show them why, 50% plus anything is really, really good. And we want you to keep attacking and getting fouled and getting free throws because we're going to help our team far more by doing that than just about any other offense we're going to run, at the middle school level and below. So getting into kind of the framework here, what I like to aim for is 1 point per shot. So this means on every shot you took, make or miss, you averaged 1 point scored per shot attempt, right? So I consider that like the gold standard. And so based on that gives us some simple math. We need 50% on average from our 2 point shots to average 1 point per shot attempt. But we only need 33% on 3 point shots in order to average 1 point per shot, right? So this is where it really starts to highlight the value of our 3 point shot. If you have a capable shooter, he's making somewhere near 30 to 33%. He's going to be more efficient at scoring that than a lot of your big guys maybe putting up putbacks after a rebound over three guys that's contested in the paint and scoring, lower than 50% on average. And so we can get into a lot of nuance of decision making just based on that simple of a framework. So regardless of what our team and our skill level actually is, if we're targeting 1 point per shot as like the ideal, then we can usually make some progress and pull some players forward toward just the thinking behind that. And then, I like to point out all this is kind of based around NBA numbers because that's where we have the most stats to study it. But really diving into different skill levels, we find it's basically just scalable. It goes down a little bit, but you're playing similar level of offense against similar level of defense. And so if you're scoring that, they're probably scoring similar to that. And so it's an equivalent. It just goes down in scale as you go down in age group or in ability. So like the NBA is going to average 1.0 to 1.15 points per shot, right? That's where the 23-24 Celtics were killing it, and they were just creating a 15-point spread every game because they were defending at this level and scoring at this level, and then they win. Right? College tends to be zero point 0.8 to 1.0. High school tends to average 0.6 to 0.8. If you're in middle school, it might be like 0.4 to 0.6, and it might go down from there as you go down in age. But you can really take a game or a 5 game series and just do some quick calculations and say, like, okay, hey, we're averaging zero point 0.3 right now, and what can we do to improve that? And then we can also talk about the defensive side. What can we do to hold the other team to a lower points per shot value efficiency? And again, create a spread between what we score and what we're defending to hold them to a lower efficiency and a lower score. So that making sense to you guys so far?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah. This is
Yeah.
kind of second nature to me, so I can fly through it, but I want to make sure I'm not losing you. So the points per shot value is not necessarily just high is better, right? It's not high is not better. It's the important factor is the differential between the offense and defense. So kind of reiterating what I just said. So if you have a point 0.6 offense, right? 0.6 points per shot. If you can just hold the other team on average to 0.5, then you're going to win, right? It's just like that's how it stacks up. And really, when we've studied a lot of games, you'll see that most games have a very similar number of possessions, right? We're changing possession after every play, and so we might end up with one or two more possessions than the other team, especially if we got steals and fast breaks. But in the end, like over a season, you're going to say like we were pretty much equal with our opponent. And so if we get this small percentage margin on every shot we take over a 40 possession game, let's say in middle school, it's that percentage times 40 that stacks up to be, a 10-point win, for instance. And the Celtics, again, were able to average 1.15 points per shot, which is really like the top that we ever see in the NBA. If you can average a whole season at 1.15, is like you're probably going to be high in the playoffs and maybe the NBA champion, right? It's really hard to do. And the difference is not that big because most teams are averaging somewhere in the 1.0 range, right? And so really it's just holding them to 1.0 and scoring 1.15 that gives us a 15-point differential, right? Over 100 shots in an NBA game, longer game, faster pace. They get 100 possessions, they win by 15 points if they can just hold that difference. And most of the work, again, is on the offensive side of taking better shots that are higher efficiency scoring. And then you do have to do the job on defense to hold your opponent below that, right? So I guess contrasting that with like the NBA All-Star game where they're doing all the scoring efficiency, right? They score 150 points, but nobody's playing defense, and so it's usually a close game. It's just like we score both ways, no defense happens, our efficiency's off the charts, but our defensive ability is not there to create a differential and create a sizable win usually. Dana's raising his hand. Tell me what you got.
Yeah, thank you. Drive-in slash park-in, so I'm not at my desk where I would normally take notes, but if
Sure.
possible, via email or in the chat, uh, you just intrigued me with when you broke down the averages of points per possession for high school, middle school,
Yeah.
younger grade. If that could just be recapped at some point, I would greatly appreciate it.
Certainly. Yeah. And we'll capture this on video. I also have a
Oh yeah, that's
transcription
right
I
too.
can
Yeah, yeah.
send
No,
you
no, that's
of
fine.
the video so you can definitely see that again. But
Right, thank you.
yeah, just knowing, like I said, we kind of have studies for higher level abilities and different levels of basketball. But if you can just take 5 games and measure the average for your team, then you got a baseline that you can work off of and talk to your team about. So this is where we get into shot selection based on this. So again, the Boston Celtics from 23-24 are my favorite example that I did a kind of a deep dive study to kind of show our players why this works the way it does, right? So the question I like to ask is why are no shots taken in this zone, right? So this was the year where they were stroking threes from all over the place, which they continue to do, and they were driving really well, finishing at the rim. This was actually the Drew Holiday corner, if you guys remember that season, where he just had this one spot where he never missed a three in his life. And so it was dark, dark blue, really just based on him alone making that corner three all the time. And so really what we arrive at is that, the 2-point shot, if we can get 70, 80% scoring, which I'll get more specifics in a minute, actually what they scored, but it's like 67 if I remember right off the top of my head. If we can get really efficient scoring 2-pointers at 67%, then we're going to make, 1.34, whatever that comes to, 1.34 points per shot, right? And then as we go out and we're contested and we're off the dribble and the shot's more complicated, the percentage goes down until it's not worth taking that shot. We'd rather actually back up and shoot a three but at a lower percentage because we get more points out of every one we make, right? And so that was the difference I highlighted a minute ago is 50% on your twos, 33% on your threes still gets you an average of 1 point per shot attempt. And that's really what they were really proving for us statistically here with this season. I got a chat from somebody here. Unless you're Kevin
Unless you're
Garnett.
Kevin.
Okay. Right. So we'll get to that, like why and where the mid-range is actually a useful tool, right? And so I try to walk players through this. Um, so 63.7% is what I was looking at. The deep paint layups, right? And so just rounding that up for easier math, 64% times 2 points, 1.28 points per shot value, right? Every time they were in a paint, taking a layup, even though it's contested a lot of the time, which we'll talk about the differences there, right? It's not an easy free dunk. A lot of the time, there's people all around contesting us. We're not going to make 100% of our layups. We're going to make 63.7% over a whole season. But we're going to average way above our 1.0 gold standard. We're getting 1.28 points per shot, right? And this includes everything. So this is all fast break dunks where nobody was there. This is all contested layups that, barely rolled in or missed because the defense was there. And then if we go to our three pointers above the break. So the NBA has really good stats segmented by different spots around the arc, right? So this was like the best I could find, like an average of their normal threes, 36.9%, which is good, which is above our 33% mark, which I like to talk to players like the green light level. Like if you can hit over 33% in a game from three, then you got the thumbs up to keep shooting threes. If you're below that, then we got work to do. And again, this comes back to comparing to what our baseline is as a team because, maybe we're a 25% shooter, but the rest of our team is so poor at scoring that maybe that guy is still a green light for your specific situation, right? But what we look at here is 37% at 3 points is 1.1 points per shot value. So again, still above our 1.0 target that we're trying to hit. And then the mid range is really highlighted because it drops a lot at 44%, even though we're making a higher percentage than we did at 3 point land. Because it's only worth 2 points, the points per shot value is only 0.88, right? And so this is where we start to look at what we call the no shot zone between this is the extended arc on the NBA line, but between your 3 point arc and your mid range, right? Between, let's say, 3 point and free throw for most of our middle schoolers, we don't really want to shoot in that range, right? We'd rather you get more space and make it a three than be contested and only worth two at a similar percentage. Does that make sense to you guys?
Mm.
Cool. All right, so this is where I kind of just map this out. So again, 3 point shots, I'm kind of taking like round ideal numbers to just look at what changes when we're contested versus uncontested. So an uncontested shot, NBA range, right? NBA shooter at least, they're going to hit about 60%. Nobody's nearby, they're wide open, they're in rhythm, they're going to hit a lot of those shots, even from deep range. What we see is contested is just about perfectly half when there's a hand in their face, they miss twice as much, right? Which gives us a lot of defensive intelligence to work on with our players is that every effort you make to contest it, which we talked about in our defensive module, really cuts that made percentage way down and gives us more defensive rebound opportunities. Mid range goes from 70% down to 35%. And what the C's actually did, the Celtics here actually did was 44%. And then deep paint, uncontested, we're going to make 95% if we're all alone at the rim making a layup or a dunk, right? We're still going to miss a couple, fast break, especially with our middle schoolers. But contested, it's going to drop in half to about 45% again, right? And the Celtics, again, averaged between those two, like it was all shots, averaged to 64%. And so, really, what I like to highlight out of this on the defensive side is like, we want to be contesting. We want to be making that effort to put a hand in everybody's face all the time, even if they make a couple, which as a middle schooler is demoralizing. Like I tried really hard and I look cringe, as they say, because the guy hit the shot in my face while I was really trying. And so what we'll see them doing is stop trying because of that 1 out of 5 shots that that kid hit in his face. But what we can try to point them to is like we're playing the probability game here. Is like if you keep putting your hand in his face, he's just gonna miss two more this game than he otherwise would if your hand wasn't there, right? We're playing the long term probability math game by contesting shots, and if you can really highlight to them like he's gonna miss twice as much as he otherwise would. And sometimes you'll have a really good shooter, like he's hitting 40% from three. He's like dominating the middle school league, right? But if we're hands in his face and he only hits 20% in this game because we're always there, then we might just win the game for that factor, right? So contesting can have a really big impact on defense. So the math of shot selection again, the average kind of gives you guidance. What the Celtics average is like a great metric for me to just point people toward. The deep paint again, we average 1.28. 3 point shots, if we can make 40%, we average 1.2. And mid range, 44%, we get only 0.8. And then back to the free throws. If we're trying to make an equivalent apples to apples comparison of free throws, we're going to do it with two free throws. So we compare it to an average 2 point shot, right? And if we can make 80%, which is kind of where the Celtics were in that season, 2 points times 80%, we get two tries at it, makes it 1.6. So this is again where free throws win games is mathematically proven out. It's like anything we can get above 50% means we are killing it on our scoring efficiency by just making free throws. any chance we get. I'm gonna pause there again. Any questions from you guys?
No, I'm good now. This is good.
Cool. Let's go more.
BJ,
Yeah,
we in the past, you shared with me, and this is more of a review of stuff you've shared with me. I know you had a video you had shared with me. There's a college coach that goes over this
yeah,
heavily and how he makes his players believe in it. And
yeah,
basically just tells everybody like, hey, if you don't shoot a layup, or a 3-pointer, they're basically the shots are no good,
yeah,
and and I can't remember the name of the video, but it just reinforces everything you're talking about right now. And you know, it was a couple years ago, and I've told the kids this, but you have to, at their age level, keep reinforcing it by
yeah.
putting the hand in the face.
Right.
And also because the hand in the face actually changes the game more at these kids level than
Yeah,
actually making the shots at whatever percentage. So
absolutely.
I just wanted to reinforce kind of like what you were talking about, and that there's the video, I can't remember the name of it, you had shared.
Yeah,
The
I'm trying to
defense
remember which
actually
one that would
changes
be.
the game. The
Yeah,
changes the game almost more than the shooting for the kids at this level.
yeah. No, I think that's true. The lower skill level the shooters are, the more impact that contest really has. And we had talked
Yeah.
about I forget which week. We might have touched on it 2 times so far, but the incentives in practice, right? Like rewarding them with points every time they do what we call a level 2 contest, which I'll break down again in a minute more. But trying to give them a grading system for how well did you contest it and giving them points for that really helps kind of smooth that bridge, kind of what you're talking about. Get them to understand the value of this independent of if they make the shot. Like, guy might hit the shot, but I did my level 2 contest. I got 2 points, even though he scored still. We're trying to make
Yep.
that connection in their mind really consistently so that it becomes like a habit. Like just knowing I am having an impact every shot. It's a probability game. Even if he makes a couple, I keep doing that and I have an impact over the long game.
Yep.
So this is some of the questions I like to highlight with our players. So I actually borrowed this from our players course to kind of talk through with you guys. So interesting choices, right? If you have let's say, a offensive rebound with 4 people around you in the paint, and you're about to shoot a contested layup, that's 45%, what we just talked about in the paint. 45% layup is going to be zero point 0.9 points per shot, or kick it out to our best 3-point shooter that's making 1.05 points per shot, right? Nearly all coaches at all levels would say go straight up because we're hoping that we're going to get a made shot and a foul and an extra free throw. But at 45%, it's like the outcomes could be yes, I make the shot and get fouled. It could be I make the shot and I was fouled but nobody called it. It could be I miss the shot and I get fouled, or it could be I missed the shot and nobody called a foul and I lost the ball, right? And we don't really think about the other possibilities. We're like so dialed in, like I want the and one put back with a foul and an extra free throw, when we could be saying I want to keep possession of the ball and control the play and get a higher efficiency shot. And sometimes that might be I'm kicking out of a can of sardines with 4 people around me to get space, and then we're just back to running our offense, and we get our normal maybe 1.0, 1.25 value shot by just working longer and getting a better shot at the end. Um, Next one is shoot the uncontested 3-point shot on the catch or drive into what could be a contested layup, right? And players have a lot of trouble with this one because we want the layup, right? We'd say it's a higher value points per shot on the layup, but the decision tree means we get to evaluate our 3-point catch first, right? And so, really, where I've arrived at is kind of what we talked about week 1 a little bit, but the idea of shoot first and drive second, like just simplifying our decision making. And, this has to scale with the skill level and the size and ability of your players and even individual players because it might be a player that is not capable of making a 3-point shot. And so we got to adjust this to meet kind of where his capability is. But as a general framework, if we have the size of the court scaled, which I'd like to talk about more specific to Chris's age group. Like I like to use a miniature 3-point line with the lowered hoop and the smaller ball so that all this spacing concepts and, just technique for the strength and size of the player still works. And they get to start looking at this 12-foot 3-point line is makeable and I get three versus I drive into the sardine can and get squished and take a really tough shot, right? And so trying to get players to think that through. And so really where I've arrived at with a lot of experimentation with this is just shoot the three first if you've got it and drive second because A, we're going to pull defense farther out by coming to contest your 3-point shot, and B, we're going to get more points for it if you make it, whatever percentage you're capable of making it. And getting comfortable with that shot first mentality means everybody's a threat when they catch it. The defense has to spread to respect that, and when we do drive, we are that much more effective at beating defense and creating more advantages. And then the third one, maybe most importantly, back to Ian's point about Kevin Garnett, or if we watched the Celtics lose to the Knicks this past year playoff time, the Knicks were masterful at hitting mid-range shots, and really what we find is the better the defense is, the more effective a mid-range shot can become, right? So kind of a counterpoint to what we showed with the Celtics. Like the Celtics were just driving, like spraying it out, getting threes everywhere they wanted to. As the defense gets better, especially in playoff time, we see that the three is taken away, the rim is taken away, and there's actually a pocket of space now available in the mid range that might even be uncontested, right? It's like we're trying so hard as a defense to not let them get an open three on the catch, and we're working really hard on our defensive rotation to protect the rim and not get layups. Suddenly there's a pocket and a hole in the defense where a mid-range either catch and shoot or a pull up off the dribble might actually be our best shot. We're getting open space there kind of between the two lines of defense if you think about it that way, where a mid-range shot can be really effective. And then if we're comparing that to a contested three or a contested layup, an uncontested mid-range might be our highest points per shot value at that point. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Ian says Shy is a master at that. Absolutely. Right. Shy with the OKC Thunder. Like he very deservedly won the MVP by being capable of all three of these, right? So you guys familiar with the term three levels of scoring?
Mm.
It's fairly common term to just describe what I just said, but be able to score at a three, score at the rim, score at the mid range. Most people would put it, three mid range rim. I try to always put them and always speak about them in the order we just talked about, so the players start to get more repetitions of thinking of it that way. And we'll go through my shot selection list in a minute, but basically I want to think about players like I want to shoot the three every time it's open. If that's not open, I want to get all the way to the rim as fast as possible. If that's not open, maybe I would take a foul going to the rim because I know I'm going to get free throws. And then if neither of those are available and I have space, I will settle for a mid-range kind of if I have to and there's no better option available, right? And we just think about that as like level one, two, if we include free throws, three, and then four as a mid range, it's like don't shoot number four. Like don't shoot option four if we have option one or two available, right? Like we don't want to shoot a mid range if we've got anything else available to find. And the younger age level or even at the high school level, if there's no shot clock, it just emphasizes this even more in my mind. Like NBA has a shot clock. Eventually, the clock's running out. There's a defender there. You got to take a contested mid range over somebody to just get something on the rim. But without a shot clock, it's like we should never have to take that contested mid range off the dribble over a defender, right? It's like, oh, not there. I'm going to back it out, swing it over. We're going to drive it again. We're going to create something new because we really have no time limitation to get the most efficient shot we want. Any questions on that one? Cool. You guys got me pumped up talking through all this. This is where my brain likes to live. So my priority list, this is what I like to give players, is we want uncontested layups, and we'll get back to the defense leading to more uncontested layups by creating more fast breaks in a minute. Free throw, because it's always uncontested. It's always the same spot, right? It's always the same distance. We should be able to make 50% or higher very easily and have a pretty high percentage. So I usually put it at like 70% is a good average, like middle school to early high school. And so like that would put it at 1.4 points per shot on average for a free throw trip of 2 shots. Then we go uncontested 3-point shot, 1.2, assuming they're hitting at about 40% in this case. And these are kind of just general targets I have for points per shot value. Again, it's gonna vary a lot with your age and skill level. So trying to find where these numbers actually lie for your team can be a good study, and especially if you get your players involved in doing the calculation so they really own that can be huge. And then we have uncontested mid-range. So they're shooting 45% and it's worth 2 points. That would give us zero point 0.9. And then we go to contested layup, right? And then contested 3-point shot and then contested mid-range. And all these just go down in value, right? And really what I end up with as a conclusion when I'm doing a clinic or doing our course on this with players is I say your best move is to just scratch this off your list, right? If you never shoot a contested mid-range again in your life, all the rest of your scoring potential goes up, right? It's like the rising tide lifts all boats. It's like if I never take this really bad shot that basically eats one of these layups that I made uncontested, right? If we're averaging them, every time I take this, it like kills one of our highest efficiency shots and we're back to pretty neutral compared to our opponent. If we can just not take the contested mid range and get anything else that's a higher points per shot value above that, our whole team becomes massively more efficient at scoring. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Cool. All right. Contested versus uncontested. So this is kind of brief review of what we did in our defensive week, week 4, a couple weeks back now. I call it the 6-foot bubble, kind of how we're measuring whether it's a contested or not. So you need to be inside the bubble with hands up to be at the maximum, level 2 contest. You need to be either hands up if you're outside of 6 feet, or maybe your hands are down, but you were inside 6 feet, you were trying to get there. Level 0 means you were outside of 6 feet and your hands were down, like you weren't really giving an effort. And this is how I would score our contesting in practice, right? It's like, hey, you got a level 2. I'm scoring it defensive points. We're playing to 8 points and you got 4 contests, you won the game before the offense could score 8 points, right? So you can make that pretty equivalent if we're doing a good job of contesting all the time. And again, reinforce that mentality that we're actually cutting down the offense ability and we're earning points. So it's an incentive to do the contest, even if they make the shot, we're still getting points for doing the effort part. So then reviewing what we ended with that defensive week, kind of the types of possessions. This is something Dana really keyed on, was very useful to him as we talked about it afterwards, trying to break down the different types of possessions and the different speeds of attack, and then relate those to the points per shot value that can be associated with them, right? So the highest points per shot value is going to lead to a fast break where we're either getting a layup, maybe contested or uncontested, but we're probably at an advantage against our opponent, right? So it might be 2-on-1 or 3-on-2 or even 1-on-nobody if we got a clean steal and run out to layup. And so a live ball ends up giving us a 1.1 to maybe 1.2 points per shot value very easily, just because we're getting really high value shots, really close to the rim, little or no defense in our way. And those come from either steals or rebounds, where it's a live change of possession where we have the element of surprise in our favor, right? The offense was just working to try to score. They either got a pass stolen or they missed a shot and we got the rebound, and we're just running before they're ready to transition and change even their mindset to being on defense. And so we have an advantage by attacking quickly. Second type of possession is a made shot. So whether it goes through the net as a field goal, right, part of the live game, or it went through the net on a free throw, either way, our team has to take it out of bounds, at least 1 foot in the out of bounds, and pass it in before we can go, right? So it slows us down a little bit. And so we just find our points per shot value drops a little bit more because the defense is that much more ready to guard us. And therefore, we don't have as many easy open uncontested layups, for instance. We're going to have to work a little bit harder. And then the third type of possession is out of bounds with the referee, right? So we tied it up and got a jump ball. It went out of bounds, or somebody traveled and had a turnover. Either way, referee had to touch it, check it into us before we could pass it. And this is the slowest possession. So this would seem to be where we would get our lowest points per shot or points per possession value. So it's another similar. I can try to differentiate that if you have a question about it, but points per shot is just like out of this one event of a shot, how many points did we get versus out of a possession. So we could say as a team, points per possession might be more relevant on this type of offense. When we have a possession out of this situation, this is what we tend to get as an average. This is what we can expect going forward, or this is a baseline that we want to try to improve based on what we know. And so each of these really can contribute to not only your speed of play, but also to your points per possession as a team. So, like, the more we get steals and rebounds, the higher our overall game points per shot value is going to be because of the type of shots we end up with. And the more half court, walk it up, play against a set defense we have, the lower our points per shot value is going to be. And, that's kind of a baseline framework before we get into like what's our half court offense going to be to create an advantage and create an open shot. Because sometimes you can get your offense really running like a well-oiled machine to where we're getting Johnny wide open layups and wide open kicks out to Jimmy for threes, and we're actually creating a pretty good efficiency points per shot value in our half court. And that's where you can become really dangerous to your opponent, is that we're gonna smoke the ball down the court on every fast break opportunity and get open layups all the time. And B, if we have a half court possession, we're going to be very patient and deliberate to create a wide open, uncontested shot with a high value. And therefore, we're going to outscore you every time down the floor compared to what you're doing as an average team that doesn't really understand the math behind it or how to change their pace of attack based on the situation. So kind of second layer on this concept. Do you guys have any questions about that? I know we touched on it briefly last time, so you've seen it before, maybe had some time to think about it. Any thoughts there?
Makes sense. I mean,
Cool.
it's basketball. It's, every time you push the ball up the floor, it seems to more plays happen, you
Yeah.
know, better percentages, everything,
Yeah.
other than the set plays of out of bounds, which, you're trying to get that perfect shot. I
Right.
mean, in the order you've listed it, you see it every day. You've played the game forever and you've coached the game. You kind of don't sometimes break it down so simplistic. And
Hmm.
that's been one of the benefits to your class to me, is that, you just kind of put the cherry on top. You just, you know, put the order of events in line, and it's easier for the younger kids to put it in a way that they can understand it, rather
Right.
than just throwing them these complex offensive plays that, really get 20% effectiveness because somebody's always out of place.
Right. Right. No, that's great. And I appreciate the compliment. Like, simplicity is what I'm always after. So you telling me it's simple is high praise for sure. I think the way we probably all experience this the most is like playing against a team that's really good at fast break. And even though we're doing our thing and we feel like we're running pretty good on our offense, we get to halftime and we're down by 20 points, right? It's just like they were scoring 2 points per shot on every fast break wide open layup, and we were scoring 1 point per shot on every trip down, and suddenly they're up by 20 in 20 possessions, right? And it's like, how did that happen so quick? It's like, well, the type of shot we take is really killing us. We're getting equal chances, but they're not equal quality of chances, right? They can really stack up quickly. All right, so kind of putting a bow around this, how I like to use this in evaluating efficiency. So for an individual player, we can give them instant feedback for each game, right? So like quick box score calculation, you took this many points or this many shots and you scored this many points, right? It might be your best player. Hey, you took 40 shots, dude, and you scored 10 points, right? You really killed us this game because we only scored 0.25 points per shot on all those that you took, even though the rest of the team was kind of doing okay, right? Or it can go the other way. Is like you might have someone you see as a weaker player, a less skilled player, and they're actually scoring like every time they take a shot. Maybe it's the post guy on a putback rebound, whatever the case may be, but it's like worth looking at. Like, hey, you got 1.9 points per shot today on your three putback layups that maybe one of them got fouled even, and you had a free throw attempt, right? It's just like instant feedback loop is like, we're not just worried about how many points we took or how many points our team scored. It's like, how efficiently did we score them and who was the most efficient? And, can we bring them forward to maybe get more minutes next game? Or can we say, to our star that's maybe the best athlete or ball handler or shooter, like, hey, I like that you're taking shots, but if you take mid-range contested shots all the time, this is what happens. And so we need to find a way to get you open shots so that we're taking more efficient. And then I like to use it to have like a predictive ability for the future, right? So if you study like a 5 game trend is kind of a number where I've landed at that starts to be useful. Less than that, it could be like we had one awesome game, and like if we set our trend based on that, we're like disappointed the rest of the season because we thought we should be here, right? If you take 5 games of the early season, you start to measure, all right, what are we actually averaging across, 5 different opponents, 5 different days where our players were in different frames of mind. What are we looking at? And then start to average by shot type, right? So then you can start speaking really knowledgeably to your players. Like if you shoot X number of mid-range contested shots, you'll only produce this many points. But if you can get to the rim or kick it out to Jimmy, our three-point shooter, we could be producing this many points out of the same number of shots or possessions. And then it's just like you don't really have to yell much. You don't have to coach much. It's just like, hey, here's the math. This is what we're trying to do. This is the offense framework that I think is going to give us the best result for this type of shot. And like, will you come along with me now that I'm like proving mathematically why this is working the way it is and what I think we could do to improve it? And I've really never had a player not buy into that. It's just way different conversation than, don't shoot that shot, Jimmy, right? That was a bad shot, is where most coaches land. It's just like, hey, over the last 5 games, this is what I found. This is what you're doing. This is what I'd like you to change. And they're like, I got it. I want to do that now because I see it. It's hugely powerful. And then third, we already talked about evaluating and grading our contested shots, right? How well are we doing on the defensive side to continually put forth the effort to contest shots, ideally at that level 2 of intensity, so that we're causing more misses. And we are trying to incentivize that again in practice by giving them 2 points every time they do that level of contest so that they feel and intuitively start to understand the connection and get rewarded for that in the short term. Just kind of tying back to our tag teach method of instructions and feedback with a points incentive is just doubly powerful. Any thoughts or questions about that? Just like how you would present this or implement it with players? Cool. If not, I'm going to jump to team and how I can use this in a team setting. So first off is our points per shot rather by possession type. So we already went through like the fast break off of a defensive steal or rebound versus after made shot versus after a check in from the referee, right? If you just stick with those 3 categories, I had a mentor of mine that broke down like all 7, but I think that gets convoluted for the players to understand. So just like it's A, B, or C, what is our grade? How many points per shot are we actually getting based on these different types of possessions, and then just present that to your players. Hey, I want to get more fast breaks because we get 1.2 on our fast break. We get only 0.6 when we walk it up. That's double. I'd like to get twice as many points, please, whenever the opportunity is there. And therefore, that can trickle down to like, hey, big guy, we want you to bust it out after rebound and lead the fast break. Hey, point guard, we don't want you to come back and save the big guy and wait for the ball. We want you running and attacking and putting the pressure on to get more uncontested shots at the other end. And then we can do similar with our plays or our offenses, right? So like, let's say we have our favorite out of bounds play, which we all tend to get one by the time we're coaching for a couple seasons. Like we love this under the basket, box or stack, whatever it is, out of bounds play. Well, let's actually measure that because the conclusion I've found is like those plays are pretty crappy at points per shot value
Mm.
because every defense has seen whatever variation of it there is, and they're pretty good at guarding it, right? And so often the conclusion is when we run our half court, drive and kick offense like we've been working on, we score zero point 0.8. And all of our out of bounds plays get us is 0.5. So like
Mm.
let's scrap the idea of an out of bounds play, get the ball into our point guard however we want to. And again, with no shot clock constraint, let's run our normal offense because we're actually pretty efficient at that. And then it's also back to the simplicity idea. It's less things that we have to point our players' attention at learning. Like we're not doing this specific out of bounds play. Is just get the ball in, run our normal offense. So therefore, we get maybe those 5 or 6 extra possessions of just getting better at running our normal offense all the time. And as long as we're doing all the other work to set them up with spacing and timing and ability to get good shots, we are usually more efficient at that. Third is tracking contested and uncontested shots. So, some of this comes down to like either needing a full-time statistician on the bench with you or needing good film that you can review after the fact and say, I'm going to go watch the whole game. I want to just look at, of our 5 players on the floor, who was doing a level 2 contest every time, who was leaving them uncontested, right? Who was shooting contested versus shooting uncontested shots, and you can just have another data point to feed back to your players. Um, Fourth is comparing your points per shot to your opponents. And this is a great one. Like if you take that same 5 game trend, you can say, hey, we're averaging 0.6 on our points per shot over the whole game, over 5 games, and our opponents are averaging 0.62. And we've won 3 and lost 2 games. We're right there, but we need to work maybe more on the defensive side. Like, can we get our opponent to be 0.55 and we just hold steady at 0.6 and then we're winning all 5 of those games, right? So you can start to look at really just tweaking either side or ideally both sides and create a bigger spread for yourself so that your defense is holding teams to really low efficiency and your offense is operating at peak efficiency, and you just got a better margin to still win a game even if it's a bad shooting day or you're missing a couple players that normally score points. Is like overall we're creating a environment where we know we can win games more easily on a consistent basis. Number 5 is evaluating players. So we've talked about that a little bit on the individual side already, but just having a feedback loop again. Hey, this player is doing really well in practice even, and so we're going to start him next game because he's given us consistently 1 point per shot when he's playing. And it also could tie to assists. Like maybe your point guard is not a scorer, but when he's on the floor, our points per shot goes way up, which is kind of what the plus minus grade now goes after with the NBA stats. But he's on the
Mm.
floor, he sets people up for way better uncontested shots than anybody else, even though he scores 0 points himself potentially, right?
Mm.
And tying that together and just like rewarding him for that and pointing that out to him is like it's not all about buckets. Like when you're on the floor, we score 1.0 or higher on our points per shot, even though you didn't make any of them yourself. You're setting people up to make that happen. And then demonstrating the need for change with the evidence, backed by math. Again, um, I always come back to a line I got from a mentor of mine when I was first coaching. He said, the only way to get better is to change, and you don't want to change. So what are we doing here? Right? That's more commonly with like I think like a high school sophomore. It's like they've had enough success, maybe they made their JV team, they're okay with where they are, and they don't want to change anything that might make them look bad, and therefore they want to get better, but they don't want to change. And so it's like, well, we're at a stalemate. Right. And so demonstrating the need to change with evidence backed by math is like my best tool I could give you guys. It's just like, hey, I want you to take this type of shot because ABC stats I can point to what you did in the last 5 games. Therefore, again, are you willing to come along with me and make this change? And by setting it up that way, it's nearly always yes. All right. That is, oop, yeah, that was the end of my slide. I didn't put my summary as I usually did at the end of this one. So to summarize, points per shot value is kind of the simplest way that I like to measure efficiency. And again, loop it back to individual player metrics and team metrics to just have real hard numbers to look at and to point your decisions toward, point your players toward of why you're making certain decisions whether it's about how you run offense or what offense you run or what players play more, get more minutes, and even who starts in the next game can really be tied down to hard math numbers, and it's hard for players or parents to argue against your playing time decisions if you've got this system set up and like this is how we operate. So I'll leave it at there. I'd love to get questions from you guys if you got either, examples you can think of where this would apply or you've used something similar, or certainly questions you have about, either the implementation of this or just the calculation stuff. Went through a lot of data here. So hit me with what you got.
Hey, BJ, I think you touched on some good points about, assists versus shooting and
Mm,
getting making sure that the kids understand that even though you're not being Michael Jordan out there scoring 20, 30 points a game, like the assist is just as important. Doing your job is just as important, whether that's getting rebounds.
yeah.
Um, and I had actually a question about. I have to go back now and think, but we're talking about the different priority lists, and
Hmm.
obviously, uncontested layups and then free throws, drawing
Yeah.
contact if you can. But
Hmm.
then when you get, and then next is the uncontested 3-pointer. But when
Yes.
you get to the point where it's a contested layup, that's when you're gonna
Yeah.
kick and swing, right?
Right, exactly. That's where, it becomes a lot more nuanced decision making. But yeah, I think the simplest way I've found to kind of lay it out with players is like if it's one on one, I'll still take a contested layup. If it's one on two, I'm going to kick it, right? And so it
Yeah,
really just ties back to the simplicity of I beat one defender. I'm now playing 5-on-4. If another defender comes to help, I know my buddy's open and I should kick it, right?
yeah,
And
because
so,
I see so many kids, especially like the star players on the team. They'll take 1-on-4 sometimes when they have
yeah,
4 players open on the wings and the corners, and they'll just try to drive up through 4 defenders. It's like
right,
wrong
right.
decision, man.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of basketball culture tends toward that. It's like
Yeah,
the rebound scenario I talked through earlier is like go straight up, like go into contact. We're hoping we're going to draw a foul and make the shot, but it's really
yeah,
like,
yeah.
if we make the four scenarios equal, like a four square grid, it's like that's a 25% chance of
Oh,
our ideal thing happening. And a lot of time we're gonna bowl into four guys and get called for a travel, or we're just gonna lose the ball, or like a lot
yeah,
of a lot of other
yes,
outcomes. So trying to really get them in the mode of decision making based on, what that second level of defense is as they're driving can be really powerful.
yeah. It reminds me of I saw like this video on Instagram where they showed basketball now, and it's a lot of ISO ball with like Shea, the star point guards.
Mm,
Have playing ISO ball versus the Spurs from the early 2000s, where it's like pass, 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 layup,
right.
like closer to the basket, and it was
Yeah.
such a pretty way to play basketball.
Yeah, definitely. Still one of my favorite teams of all time. It's
Oh,
the
amazing.
the Tony Parker, Tim Duncan Spurs years. Pretty
Oh,
awesome.
don't forget Manu Ginobili, man.
Yes, and Ginobili. Actually, while you were talking about rebounding, reminded me of another aspect I didn't really tie into, but regarding the points per shot value, like as a rebounder, what I would point the player to is like when you get a rebound that leads to a fast break, our points per shot value goes up, right? Like we just talked about that type of possession. So like if you can keep getting rebounds and either busting it out to lead the break or passing ahead to lead the break, we get twice as many points per possession when you do that compared to if you play it safe after rebound, and I call it saving you. But if I wait for the point guard to come and save me from having to dribble, then we're now playing a half court possession and our points per shot value drops, significantly. So like tying that together, connecting the dots in the player's mind is like, I'm okay if you blow it up and like dribble off your foot, lose the ball, turn it over maybe three or four times a game because the other six times per game that you get a rebound and lead it, we're scoring twice as many
It,
points. And
it,
if you keep doing that, you're going to get better at it and you're going to have less turnovers and more points. So, like, keep doing that, right? And
yeah,
yeah, connecting that can be really helpful because most coaches do the opposite and kind of handicap their rebounders from being effective in leading their break for sure.